Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in sophomore English. We turn now in our text to page 369, 370, 371. We're going to introduce ourselves one more time to the great American Gothic horror writer, the writer who Stephen King said was responsible for his entire life's work, namely Edgar Allan Poe. Poe, who is so influential in our textbook series. Put this in your notes, interestingly, no other writer is more represented in our freshman, in our sophomore, and in our junior anthologies than this single writer. We have more of his stories, more of his poems. You'll maybe remember from the freshman year, we worked with the Masque of Amontillado, that story about burying somebody alive. We worked in our maybe middle school years and last year with the Telltale Heart, about a man who cuts up somebody and buries them under the floorboard, and then boop, 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 boop. The heart starts beating simultaneously with the knocking on the door, of course, of law enforcement who's investigating. We also heard Edgar Allan Poe, The Raven, once upon a midnight dreary, while I wandered weak and weary over many curious quaint volumes of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a rapping, as of someone gently tapping on my chamber door. We also saw The Bells, a poem by Edgar Allan Poe. We now turn to the Masque of Red Death. Before we get there, though, jump to 2B. On page 369, write this down. We want to be paying attention in our study now. As sophomores, we pick up our work of the Masque of Red Death with symbolism and allegory. Let's get both of them in our notes. Symbolism, a type of figurative language in which a character, place, thing, or an event in a literary work stands for a larger idea. For example, a dog in a story may stand for loyalty. To create symbols, a writer may use these strategies. 1. Call on traditional associations and connotations. A dog is a symbol of loyalty because dogs are often praised for that virtue. Back to our freshman year in the study of the Odyssey, and of course the great story of Argos, Odysseus' dog. And then, secondly, creating new associations. If a story character cherishes an object because it was his grandfather's, the object may come to symbolize family ties. In most stories, the use of symbolism is subtle and open to interpretation. A story in which, here we go, allegory, write it down. A story in which all character settings, events, and actions are clearly symbolic is called an allegory. We're going to be using the symbol diagram here that's provided to help you, and we'll obviously be drawing a few conclusions and identifying patterns as well. On page 370, we know from our study of Poe, we know always that it's about studying vocabulary because he loved his vocabulary, he loved his rhythms, so know those vocabularies. Let's see our dates on 371 and a bit of information again about Poe. 1809 to 1849, the son of traveling actors. Poe lost his mother at an early age, was then raised by a wealthy Virginia family named Allen, from whom he took his middle name. After winning a writing contest with his story MS in a Bottle, Poe became a literary success, winning fame but not fortune. He died in poverty at the age of 40. Today, Poe is recognized as a master of the short story. Poe believed that a work of fiction has the most impact if it can be read in one sitting and if all the elements work together to create a single effect. I would write that down at 2B. Poe loves the single effect. I'm going to ask you what that single effect is at the end of Masque of Red Death. It won't be difficult to know. He is best known for tales in which the single effect is horror. Poe also pioneered detective story, science fiction. The Mystery Writers of America, by the way, call their annual awards Edgars in Poe's honor. The background for this story is the Black Death. Write it down on page 371. In the 1300s, a plague called the Black Death swept across Europe, killing as many as 25 million people. Most of those who caught the disease died within 3 to 4 days, 3 to 4 to 5 days after their symptoms appeared. Subsequent outbreaks of plague continued in Europe until recent times. Poe invented the Red Death for this story, but his tale plays on an age-old fear, the Masque of Red Death. Let's now turn to this brilliant portrayal of the silliness, the vanity of the rich and powerful and their illusions of invulnerability. We're going to have a prince. Write it down at level 1, Prospero. He's going to be our main character. He believes he can save himself and a select few from the plague that obviously is menacing the country. In the story's climax, Prospero learns that wealth and privilege will not shield him from death. If you know anything about these stories, about trying to avoid death, then you already know a little bit about the motif here that's at play. The Masque of Red Death, hey, Reading Poe, we learned this in our freshman year. Reading Poe requires serious concentration. He loves his long sentences and syntax, convoluted syntax, and his use of vocabulary. Convoluted is a wonderful word to describe much of Poe's prose, and yet, it's funny how at the end of a reading, like the Cask of Amontillado, there's never any doubt or confusion about what the story is about. We're going to see the exact same thing when we play the game now with the Masque of Red Death. All right, let's go to work. Enjoy the reading here and the horror, the Masque of Red Death.
The Masque of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe. The Red Death had long devastated the country. No pestilence had ever been so fatal or so hideous. Blood was its avatar, and its seal the redness and the horror of blood. There were sharp pains and sudden dizziness, and then profuse bleeding at the pores with dissolution. The scarlet stains upon the body, and especially upon the face of the victim, were the pest ban which shut him out from the aid and from the sympathy of his fellow men. And the whole seizure, progress, and termination of the disease were the incidents of half an hour. But the Prince Prospero was happy, and dauntless, and sagacious. When his dominions were half depopulated, he summoned to his presence 1,000 hale and light-hearted friends from among the knights and dames of his court, and with these retired to the deep seclusion of one of his castellated abbeys. This was an extensive and magnificent structure, the creation of the prince's own eccentric yet august taste. A strong and lofty wall girdled it in. This wall had gates of iron. The courtiers, having entered, brought furnaces and massy hammers and welded the bolts. They resolved to leave means neither of ingress nor egress to the sudden impulses of despair or of frenzy from within. The abbey was amply provisioned. With such precautions, the courtiers might bid defiance to contagion. The external world could take care of itself. In the meantime, it was folly to grieve or to think. The prince had provided all the appliances of pleasure. There were buffoons, there were improvisatori, there were ballet dancers, there were musicians, there was beauty, there was wine. All these and security were within. Without was the Red Death.
All right, let's pause, write it down at level 1. Poe, brilliant, in 2 paragraphs. Notice, we'll set up totally the scene. 3 things. 1, we have horrific plague going on. Dude, this is terrible. Within a half an hour, you can begin to bleed from your eyes, your skin starts turning disgusting, and you die rather quickly. Horrific pain, the Red Death. 2, the prince of the country, Prospero, notice that we have our word prosperity, of or related to happiness, usually financial success. Prospero has had enough of the Red Death. Gathering 1,000 of the most influential and most important people of his country, he walls up behind the castle walls, they bolt the doors shut, and they decide to have a party. Let's imagine there is no Red Death at all. Number 3, notice that strong and lofty walls are going to try to protect them. They will feel protected. They will feel happy. They will feel safe. Outside, of course, the poor peasants, the people who were not invited, they can all die of the Red Death. We, on the other hand, quarantine ourselves, and the walls will protect us. We will, of course, already get a sense that Poe is setting us up. Some foreshadowing, yes, of what's inevitably coming in terms of the Masque of Red Death. Masque, by the way, here meaning ball. Write that down. Masked party. Write a masked party. Here we go. Let's go to work with it.
It was toward the close of the 5th or 6th month of his seclusion, and while the pestilence raged most furiously abroad, that the Prince Prospero entertained his 1,000 friends at a masked ball of the most unusual magnificence. It was a voluptuous scene, that masquerade. But first, let me tell of the rooms in which it was held. There were 7.
7
An
rooms.
imperial suite. In many palaces, however, such suites form a long and straight vista, while the folding doors slide back nearly to the walls on either hand, so that the view of the whole extent is scarcely impeded. Here the case was very different, as might have been expected from the prince's love of the bizarre. The apartments were so irregularly disposed that the vision embraced but little more than one at a time. There was a sharp turn at every 20 or 30 yards, and at each turn a novel effect. To the right and left, in the middle of each wall, a tall and narrow Gothic window looked out upon a closed corridor which pursued the windings of the suite.
374.
These windows were of stained glass whose color varied in accordance with the prevailing hue of the decorations of the chamber into which it opened. That at the eastern extremity was hung, for example, in blue, and vividly blue were its windows. The second chamber was purple in its ornaments and tapestries, and here the panes were purple. The third was green throughout, and so were the casements. The fourth was furnished and lighted with orange, the fifth with white, the sixth with violet. The seventh apartment was closely shrouded in black velvet tapestries that hung all over the ceiling and down the walls, falling in heavy folds upon a carpet of the same material and hue. But in this chamber only, the color of the windows failed to correspond with the decorations. The panes here were scarlet, a deep blood color. Now, in no one of the 7 apartments was there any lamp or candelabrum amid the profusion of golden ornaments that lay scattered to and fro or depended from the roof. There was no light of any kind emanating from lamp or candle within the suite of chambers. But in the corridors that followed the suite, there stood, opposite to each window, a heavy tripod bearing a brazier of fire that projected its rays through the tinted glass and so glaringly illuminated the room. And thus were produced a multitude of gaudy and fantastic appearances. But in the western or black chamber, the effect of the firelight that streamed upon the dark hangings through the blood-tinted panes was ghastly in the extreme, and produced so wild a look upon the countenances of those who entered that there were few of the company bold enough to set foot within its precincts at all.
All right, let's pause. In the castle, 7 rooms. Each room, different colors. Different colors even for the windows. And fires burning in each one of the rooms. Notice the colors of the room. Room 1, blue. Room 2, purple. Room 3, green. Room 4, orange. Room 5, white. Room 6, violet. But room 7, black. Except for the windows. Not black. Red. Scarlet red. And because of the fire burning in the room, when people walked into this room, it gave a strange illusion. Notice the interesting switch from the story. Part 1 of the story, terrible plague happening, so Prospero has a way to quarantine everybody. Part 2 of the story, we're going to have a big party, but let me tell you about the rooms that were decorated, culminating with this room of black. What's going on? And of course, at To Be Again, our topic was symbolism. Obviously, we're playing some games here, aren't we?
It was in this apartment also that there stood against the western wall a gigantic clock of ebony.
The clock.
Its pendulum swung to and fro with a dull, heavy, monotonous clang. And when the minute hand made the circuit of the face, and the hour was to be stricken, there came from the brazen lungs of the clock a sound which was clear and loud and deep and exceedingly musical, but of so peculiar a note and emphasis that, at each lapse of an hour, the musicians of the orchestra were constrained to pause momentarily in their performance to hearken to the sound, and thus the waltzers perforce ceased their evolutions and there was a brief disconcert of the whole gay company, and, while the chimes of the clock yet rang, it was observed that the giddiest grew pale, and the more aged and sedate passed their hands over their brows as if in confused reverie or meditation. But when the echoes had fully ceased, a light laughter at once pervaded the assembly. The musicians looked at each other and smiled, as if at their own nervousness and folly, and made whispering vows, each to the other, that the next chiming of the clock should produce in them no similar emotion.
375.
And then, after the lapse of 60 minutes, which embrace 3,600 seconds of the time that flies, there came yet another chiming of the clock, and then, with the same disconcert and tremulousness and meditation as before.
All right, let's pause, put it at level 1. One more thing. A large clock that you've seen these clocks before, right? These large clocks with the pendulum that swings back and forth. By the way, put it at 3A. One of Edgar Allan Poe's most famous stories. We used to work a lot at the sophomore year with this story. Is called The Pit and the Pendulum. This idea of a swinging back and forth. And when the clock will in fact go off at the end of each hour, it gave off such a strange and eerie sound that all the musicians who are playing at the party stopped, and everybody looked and listened to the clock. And everybody got really, really sober and serious for a little bit. And then all of a sudden everybody would go back and go, okay, okay, we can keep going, we can keep going. Obviously the symbolism of the clock representing time, tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. It's only a matter of time before who shows up. Now we're ready for the story. The genius of Poe to kind of set us up now to get ready for what's about to happen next.
But in spite of these things, it was a gay and magnificent revel. The tastes of the prince were peculiar. He had a fine eye for colors and effects. He disregarded the decora of mere fashion. His plans were bold and fiery, and his conceptions glowed with barbaric luster. There are some who would have thought him mad. His followers felt that he was not. It was necessary to hear and see and touch him to be sure that he was not. He had directed in great part the movable embellishments of the 7 chambers upon occasion of this great fete, and it was his own guiding taste which had given character to the masqueraders. Be sure they were grotesque.
Fantastic.
There were much glare and glitter and piquancy and phantasm, much of what has been since seen in Ernani. There were arabesque figures with unsuited limbs and appointments.
Page
There were
377.
delirious fancies, such as the madman fashions. There was much of the beautiful, much of the wanton, much of the bizarre, something of the terrible, and not a little of that which might have excited disgust. To and fro in the 7 chambers there stalked, in fact, a multitude of dreams, and these, the dreams, writhed in and about, taking hue from the rooms and causing the wild music of the orchestra to seem as the echo of their steps. And anon, there strikes the ebony clock which stands in the hall of the velvet, and then, for a moment, all is still, and all is silent save the voice of the clock. The dreams are stiff frozen as they stand. But the echoes of the chime die away. They have endured but an instant, and a light, half-subdued laughter floats after them as they depart. And now again the music swells, and the dreams live and writhe to and fro more merrily than ever, taking hue from the many-tinted windows through which stream the rays from the tripods. But to the chamber which lies most westwardly of the 7, there are now none of the maskers who venture, for the night is waning away, and there flows a ruddier light through the blood-colored panes, and the blackness of the sable drapery appalls. And to him whose foot falls upon the sable carpet, there comes from the near clock of ebony a muffled peal more solemnly emphatic than any which reaches their ears who indulge in the more remote gaieties of the other apartments. But these other apartments were densely crowded, and in them beat feverishly the heart of life. And the revel went whirringly on until at length there commenced the sounding of midnight upon the clock.
Midnight, 12 o'clock.
And the music ceased, as I have told, and the evolutions of the waltzers were quieted, and there was an uneasy cessation of all things as before. But now there were 12 strokes to be sounded by the bell of the clock, and thus it happened, perhaps, that more of thought crept, with more of time, into the meditations of the thoughtful among those who reveled. And thus, too, it happened, perhaps, that before the last echoes of the last chime had utterly sunk into silence, there were many individuals in the crowd who had found leisure to become aware of the presence of a masked figure which had arrested the attention of no single individual before. And the rumor of this new presence having spread itself whisperingly around, there arose at length from the whole company a buzz or murmur expressive of disapprobation and surprise, then, finally, of terror, of horror, and of disgust.
A masked figure shows up.
In an assembly of phantasms such as I have painted, it may well be supposed that no ordinary appearance could have excited such sensation.
378.
In truth, the masquerade license of the night was nearly unlimited, but the figure in question had out-Heroded Herod, and gone beyond the bounds of even the prince's indefinite decorum. There are chords in the hearts of the most reckless which cannot be touched without emotion, even with the utterly lost, to whom life and death are equally jests. There are matters of which no jest can be made.
Some things are not funny.
The whole company, indeed, seemed now deeply to